The vibrant village of Mali was known for its bustling market days, where merchants shouted their wares, and the air was filled with the scents of roasted plantains and spicy stews. The village had one figure who stood out above all: Yousef, the butcher. Yousef's stall was a sight to behold. His cuts of meat gleamed like polished rubies in the sunlight, each piece perfectly marbled and wrapped in banana leaves. The aroma of his spice rubs lingered in the air, drawing villagers from far and wide. From elders with discerning palates to children clutching copper coins, everyone came to Yousef for his sweet, tender, and impossibly juicy meat. It wasn't just the meat that enchanted people, it was Yousef himself. With a charming smile and a laugh as deep as a lion's roar, he had a way of making everyone feel like they were his favorite customer. "Only the best for my people," he would declare, his rich baritone voice ringing across the market square. But Yousef was no ordinary man. Beneath his long flowing robe, embroidered with the intricate patterns of his Akan heritage, lay a secret that no one in the village knew: a serpent's tail. His secret was as ancient as the baobab trees that lined the village outskirts, a legacy passed down through generations of his family. By day, he walked and spoke like any other man. By night, when the market stalls were packed away and the village fires burned low, Yousef's tail emerged, a glittering scaled thing that shimmered in the moonlight. It was said that the serpent within him granted him a unique connection to the animals he butchered, whispering secrets of their flesh and flavor. But Yousef carried his secret with a heavy heart. He had seen what fear and suspicion could do to people. The villagers, though kind and joyful, told stories of creatures that walked among them, disguised as humans, stories of monsters who lured people into danger. Yousef knew that if his secret were ever discovered, the love and admiration he enjoyed would turn to fear, and his flourishing business would crumble like a termite mound in the rain. For years, Yousef kept his secret hidden, ensuring that not a soul in the village suspected the truth. But secrets, like the roots of a fig tree, have a way of growing and surfacing in unexpected ways. And as Yousef's fame spread beyond Mali, whispers began to circulate, whispers of his meat that was too good, too tender, too perfect to be of this world. One day, as the sun began its slow descent behind the hills, casting long shadows over the village, a stranger arrived in Mali. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with skin as dark as the rich soil and eyes sharp as an eagle's. Draped in a faded brown cloak, he carried a weathered staff carved with strange markings. His name was Ibo, and he was a traveling griot, part storyteller, part healer, and part seeker of truths. Ibo had heard of Yousef's meat while passing through neighboring villages. "Sweet as honey," they said, "so tender it melts in your mouth." But it wasn't the praise that intrigued him. It was the hushed whispers of suspicion that followed. "No man's meat can be that perfect," some said. "There is sorcery at play," others murmured. That evening, as Yousef cleaned his stall and prepared to head home, Ibo approached him. "Greetings, Yousef the butcher," Ibo said, his deep voice carrying the weight of distant lands. Yousef looked up, flashing his signature smile. "Welcome, traveler. Have you come for the finest meat in Mali?" Ibo chuckled. "I have heard of your skill, and I must say your reputation precedes you. But I am not here for meat. I am here for stories." "Stories?" Yousef asked, narrowing his eyes slightly. "Yes, stories. Every village has its tales, and every man his secrets," Ibo said, his gaze piercing. "And I've heard whispers that you, Yousef, have a tale worth hearing." Yousef's hands froze mid-motion, the blade he was wiping gleaming in the fading light. For a moment, the only sounds were the rustle of the wind and the distant bleating of goats. But Yousef quickly regained his composure, his laugh rolling out like thunder. "Stories, you say? You won't find them here, Griot. I am but a simple butcher," Yousef said, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Ibo nodded, as if accepting the answer, but his curiosity was not so easily sated. "Perhaps," he said, leaning on his staff, "but I will remain in the village for a while. And who knows, sometimes the simplest men have the most complex stories. Yousef felt a chill run down his spine. This was no ordinary visitor. He sensed that Ebo's presence was more than a coincidence, and it unsettled him. That night, as Yousef walked home beneath the silver glow of the moon, he felt the weight of Ebo's words pressing on him. At home, his modest hut stood at the edge of the village, near the dense forest that stretched for miles. Inside, Yousef removed his robe, and his serpent's tail uncoiled, shimmering like liquid silver. He sat on his mat, lost in thought. For years he had balanced his secret life with his public persona, but something told him that Ebo's arrival would bring change. Whether good or ill, he did not know. The next day, Ebo wandered the market, weaving through stalls and chatting with the villagers. He listened intently as they sang Yousef's praises. "No one else's meat compares," one woman said, holding up a parcel of Yousef's best cuts. "Even the old chief sends his sons here to buy it," added another. But Ebo also noticed the shadows of doubt lingering in some voices. "It's not natural," whispered a man, sharpening his knife. "How does he always have the freshest cuts, even when the herds are thin?" Ebo nodded thoughtfully. That evening, he returned to Yousef's stall just as the butcher was closing up. "Yousef," Ebo said, "I would like to make a request." Yousef raised an eyebrow. "And what is that, Griot?" "I wish to join you on your journey home tonight," Ebo said with a faint smile. Yousef stiffened. No one had ever dared to ask such a thing before. He forced a laugh. "What a strange request. Surely you have better things to do than accompany a simple butcher on his way home." But Ebo's smile did not waver. "The road is long and the night is full of stories. Perhaps you might share some with me as we walk." Yousef hesitated, the weight of his secret pressing down on him. But refusing outright might raise suspicion, and Ebo's sharp eyes seemed to peer straight into his soul. Finally, Yousef nodded. "Very well, Griot, let us walk." As the two men made their way along the winding dirt path, the forest loomed dark and quiet around them. Ebo spoke of his travels, of distant lands and ancient myths, but Yousef barely listened. He was too aware of the swish of his robe, the weight of his tail hidden beneath it. Then, as they approached the clearing near Yousef's hut, Ebo stopped suddenly. "Yousef," he said, his voice low and steady, "I have walked many roads and seen many things, but I have never seen a man whose shadow moves differently from his body." Yousef froze. He turned slowly, his heart pounding like a war drum. "What are you saying, Griot?" Ebo's eyes glinted in the moonlight. "I am saying that the time for secrets has passed. Show me who you truly are, Yousef." The air grew thick with tension, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Yousef clenched his fists, his mind racing. Should he trust this stranger, or should he run, as he had done so many times before? Yousef's fists clenched and his jaw tightened. He glared at Ebo, the piercing accusation in his words, striking a nerve that Yousef had buried for years. But he refused to let panic consume him. "You speak of shadows and riddles," Yousef said, his voice low and steady, though his heart pounded like a drum. "But I am a man like any other in this village." Ebo tilted his head, studying Yousef as if the butcher were an intricate puzzle. He tapped his staff lightly against the ground, the rhythmic sound filling the tense silence. "I am no fool, Yousef. You carry more than the weight of your cleaver. And the truth." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The truth will not remain hidden forever." Yousef took a step back, instinctively pulling his robe tighter around him. "You should leave," he said firmly. "Whatever you think you know, keep it to yourself. My life is my own." Ebo smiled faintly, but there was no mockery in it, only a quiet determination. "Very well, butcher, but remember this. Secrets have a way of rotting, just like meat left too long in the sun." With that, Ebo turned and disappeared into the shadows of the village, leaving Yousef standing alone, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear and suspicion. That night, Yousef sat in the small hut he called home, the flickering light of his oil lamp casting long shadows on the walls. He could still feel Abo's gaze, piercing and unrelenting, as if the griot were somehow watching him even now. His tail, usually coiled tightly beneath him, twitched restlessly. It had been years since anyone had come so close to discovering the truth. Most villagers were too enamored with his meat to ask questions, but Ebo was different. He was not a man blinded by sweetness or tender cuts. He was a seeker, and seekers were dangerous. As the hours passed, Yousef's mind raced. What if Ebo told the others? What if the villagers turned on him? He thought of their faces, their praises, their laughter as they left his stall with bundles of meat. Would those same faces twist with hatred if they knew the truth? Unable to bear the suffocating silence, Yousef stood and stepped outside. The moon hung high in the sky, bathing the village in a pale glow. He needed to clear his head, to think. He wandered toward the edge of the forest, where the trees stood like silent sentinels. The forest had always been his sanctuary, the one place where he could be himself without fear. Here, beneath the canopy of stars and leaves, he unfastened his robe and let his tail unfurl. It shimmered in the moonlight, its scales catching the light like precious gemstones. Yousef sighed, the weight of hiding lifted, if only for a moment. He ran his fingers along the smooth, cool surface of his tail, a part of himself that was both a blessing and a curse. But then a sound, a twig snapping underfoot. Yousef froze, his senses sharp. He turned toward the noise, his tail curling protectively around him. "Who's there?" he called, his voice firm but edged with unease. From the shadows stepped Ebo, his staff in hand and his expression unreadable. "You hide your truth well, Yousef, but the forest knows and so do I." Fury and fear surged through Yousef. "You followed me?" he demanded. "How dare you—" "I came to understand," Ebo interrupted, his voice calm but resolute. "And now I do." "You understand nothing," Yousef roared, his tail snapping through the air like a whip. "You think you can stroll into my life, unravel my secrets, and walk away untouched? You know nothing of what it means to live like this." Ebo took a step forward, unflinching. "Then tell me, Yousef, tell me what it means. I am not here to harm you. I am here to listen." Yousef's tail lashed again, the frustration and fear bubbling to the surface. But as he stared into Ebo's eyes, he saw no malice, no mockery, only an unshakable patience. For the first time in years, Yousef let his guard down. "You want to know what it means?" he said bitterly. "It means living every day in fear. It means hearing their praises, but knowing that if they knew the truth, they would turn on me in an instant. It means being trapped between the man I am and the creature I was born to be." Ebo listened in silence, his expression softening. "And the meat? Is that why it is unlike any other?" Yousef nodded, his voice quieter now. "It's the connection, the serpent within me. It feels the life of the animals, their strength and spirit. I honor them, and in return, they give me their finest." Ebo let out a long breath, as if the weight of Yousef's confession had settled on him too. "Yousef," he said, his voice gentle, "you are not a curse upon this village. You are its blessing, but the fear you carry will destroy you if you let it." Yousef shook his head. "You don't understand. The villagers would never see it that way. To them, I would be a monster." "Perhaps," Ebo said thoughtfully, "or perhaps they would see you as the man who has fed them, nurtured them, and brought them together." Yousef looked away, doubt clouding his eyes. "It's a risk I cannot take." Ebo placed a hand on Yousef's shoulder. "Then let me carry your story, Yousef. Let me find a way to honor you, so that one day they may know the truth, not with fear, but with gratitude." Yousef hesitated, the weight of his secret and the griot's words battling within him. Finally he nodded, a small but significant gesture. "If you must tell it, Griot, tell it well." Ebo smiled. "I promise, Yousef, your story will be told with care, And so the griot left the forest that night, carrying with him a tale of a butcher whose gift was both his greatest strength and deepest burden. Whether the villagers would one day hear the truth, only time would tell. But for Yousef, there was a small comfort in knowing that his story was in the hands of one who understood. For days after their encounter in the forest, Abo remained silent about Yousef's secret. But true to his word, the griot began crafting a tale, not as a direct revelation but as a parable shared during his nightly storytelling sessions in the village square. His story told of a mythical butcher blessed by the spirits, whose connection to life and nature made him the greatest in the land. The villagers, intrigued, listened intently, unknowingly hearing the truth about Yousef in the guise of legend. Meanwhile, Yousef remained torn between fear and hope. Ebo's parable planted seeds of acceptance in the village, but Yousef couldn't help but remember why he had lived in secrecy for so long. Yousef's tale began long before his birth, rooted in an ancient curse that befell his family. Many generations ago, one of his ancestors, a hunter named Barco, had ventured deep into the forbidden forest. In his arrogance, Barco hunted a massive serpent, a revered guardian spirit of the land. Though the serpent begged for mercy, Barco ignored its pleas and struck it down. As the serpent lay dying, it uttered a curse. "Your bloodline shall carry my essence, and your descendants shall live as neither fully human nor fully beast. Only those who embrace this burden with honor and humility shall know peace." The curse took hold, and from that day on, certain members of Barco's lineage were born with serpent-like features, scales on their skin, forked tongues, or, as in Yousef's case, a tail. Most saw it as a mark of shame, hiding their deformities and living in fear of being ostracized. But Yousef's mother, a wise and loving woman, taught him to view his tale as a gift. "You are connected to the earth and its creatures in ways others cannot understand," she had told him when he was a child. "Do not see yourself as cursed, my son. See yourself as chosen." Yousef had clung to her words, though the world often made it hard to believe them. When his parents passed, he moved to the village, hoping to start fresh. There he discovered his unique connection to the animals he butchered. He could sense their spirits, their pain, and their joy. He treated them with respect, whispering prayers of gratitude before taking their lives. In return, the meat he prepared was unlike any other, tender, juicy, and imbued with a depth of flavor that could only come from such reverence. But Yousef knew the villagers would not understand. If they saw his tale, they would call him a monster, accuse him of witchcraft, or worse. And so he hid, letting his meat speak for him while his true self remained a secret. One evening, as Ebo sat weaving another parable, one of the villagers, an elderly woman named Nana Abena, interrupted him. "This story of yours, Griot," she said, her voice sharp but curious. "Is it about Yousef?" The square fell silent. Ebo glanced at Yousef, who stood frozen at the edge of the crowd. Slowly, the griot nodded. "It is inspired by him, yes." The villagers murmured among themselves, their gazes shifting between Ebo and Yousef. Finally, Nana Abena spoke again. "Then tell us, Yousef, is it true? Are you blessed by the spirits?" Yousef's heart raced. He wanted to run, to hide, but he remembered Ebo's words. "Let me carry your story." He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and loosened his robe. Gasps rippled through the crowd as his tale unfurled, shimmering under the moonlight. Some villagers recoiled while others stared in awe. Yousef's voice trembled as he spoke. "Yes, it is true. I was born with this tale, a mark of an ancient curse placed upon my family. But it is also a blessing. It connects me to the animals I butcher, allowing me to honor their lives and provide the finest meat for this village. Everything you have tasted, everything you have praised comes from this truth." For a moment, there was silence. Then Nana Abena stepped forward, her eyes filled with both wonder and understanding. "Yousef," she said softly. "We have always known you were special. What you carry does not make you a monster, it makes you a gift to this village." Her words broke the tension, and one by one the villagers began to nod. Though some were still wary, the majority approached Yousef, not with fear but with gratitude. They thanked him for his honesty, for his service to the village, and for trusting them with his secret. In the days that followed, Yousef noticed a change. The villagers no longer avoided his gaze or whispered behind his back. Children marveled at his tale, asking endless questions about its shimmer and strength. Even those who had once been wary of him began to warm, their fear replaced by respect. Ebo's parable became a celebrated tale, retold across the village and beyond. And though Yousef still bore the weight of his family's curse, he no longer carried it alone. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen, not as a monster, but as a man. And so Yousef continued his work, his secret no longer hidden, but celebrated as a part of who he was. The serpent's curse had not been lifted, but in embracing it, Yousef had found something far more valuable: peace, acceptance, and the unshakable bond of community.